Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Stacy, episode 475. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPatton89 on Twitter. Stacy, how you doing on this Sunday afternoon?
Doing pretty well. Focused more on March Madness a little bit than recent events.
Yes. Yeah, well, we probably won't talk about that, but we will talk about the Knicks, who dropped a game to the Warriors Saturday night. 97 to 94. Before we do that, I just make the announcements. First, being that Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may watch this podcast if you are not done so already. Please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be huge help to us. Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrict.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store, and there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can find on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we got it. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's the $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that I started Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes My Views Bows, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you get access to the Strickland Discord with conversation never stops. So further tiers is a $9 tier that gets you access to Chuck and Roll, my solo pod, where I rant with the Knicks Memorial. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Marino, one of the best in the business. And you got Strickland Fell, which you guess is a podcast about NFL that is hosted by Kyle Mattress. There's a $15 tier, a $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier. That's going with a variety of additional benefits, like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. This would be possible without you. And this would be possible. Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's trusted betting platform and your number one companion with a large selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest. Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, Bet Online is you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online game starts here. The Knicks lost 97-94 yesterday. Look, they don't have Jalen. The offense is going to be a bit of a with him to be fair next year. Particularly against high-level team, and Golden State is absolutely playing at a high level right now. I think they're 14-1 or something like that. The bar trade. I don't. The moral victories not doing anything for this team anymore. I understand why it is extremely frustrating that it seems like every time they play on national television against a top-end team, they cannot come away with a win. I get that frustration, and it's completely valid, and I feel that. Again, I think chalking all of the games that you play against top-end teams and lumping them together is not a great way of evaluating it. And then, look, I'll just talk about it because obviously this has been a big thing. The Knicks, look, they lose the game. We know what Draymond Green had said regarding Karl-Anthony Towns a couple weeks ago, when he missed the previous matchup against Golden State. And look, I don't even want to, I'm not going to rehash exactly what he said. Everybody that is listening to this, I'm sure, is well aware of it. It was, he shouldn't have said it. He didn't bother apologizing. He kind of deflected when asked about it. And he made some more what I thought were asinine comments after the game yesterday. After the game, the Knicks did not, they didn't start a fight with him during the game. After the game, several of the players in the team, and Tom Thibodeau himself as a head coach, were happy to shake hands with him. And look, if you're saying, like, I understand the idea of it would be nice to see the team, like, Karl-Anthony Towns just walked off the floor. I get why the entire team probably isn't going to just walk off the floor, but would it be nice for the guys to ignore him and throw him a cold shoulder or whatever? Sure. Yeah, I get that. But I've just seen a lot of, like, this team is not tough. Last year's team was tough. Last year's team was this year's team is something else. And, I don't want to get into the debate of what last year's team was versus what this year's team is and whatever. But if you're going to talk about like responding to these things in some physical way or verbally or whatever is a sign of toughness, like last year's team, they played the Sixers in the first round of the playoffs. Joel Embiid spent the better part of an entire game 3, trying to hurt players in the team, various players in the team. Nobody on the team really stepped to him. I think DiVincenzo, when he did, immediately kind of backed down when Embiid got in his face. They lost that game. They didn't. I think throughout the series, they were that guys would shake his hand after games and whatever. You know why it doesn't matter and why nobody cares? Because Knicks won the series. That's why nobody cares. Because this isn't about their lack of toughness. This isn't about, oh, I don't identify with this team the way I identified with last year's team. The reality is this. This year's team has championship expectations. Last year's team didn't. When you have championship expectations, everything becomes something to be critical of, to be pointed at, to kind of draw skepticism from. And I can understand that, but like, I just find it very fucking weird. It feels like every time the Knicks lose, it is this is why this team can't win a championship. And it's not just like, oh, they can't win a championship this year. It's like something is so fundamentally flawed about this group of players that there's no hope for them to ever compete for a championship, be it this year, next year, the year after, whatever. I think that's bullshit. I'll tell you exactly why I think it's bullshit. A couple years ago, last year, everybody would have said, well, Cleveland's soft. They can't compete for a championship. They can't do this. They can't do that. They're not tough enough. Now what? Now they're tough enough magically with the same group of players?
I mean,
What happened? They found the toughness gene?
Even last year, before the Celtics won, we used to say the same thing about Tatum, right? Can this guy get you a championship, right? And you can argue that their team was so good that maybe he didn't have, but everyone goes through it, right? Every team goes through that questioning, and everything is looked at as a referendum. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I get that. Like, I understand that from non-Knicks fans. I get that from national media, fans of other teams. That makes complete sense. And I understand being skeptical about this team's ability to win a championship this year. I don't disagree with that. But when it starts getting into like this team can't win because they're cowards, because a bunch of them shook Draymond Green's hand after the game. I mean, like, give me a break, man. Like, honestly, give me a break. Like, Draymond Green is a guy who, famously was ejected from an NBA final, suspended for a game because of, kind of how LeBron baited him into it. And now all he does is run around talking about how great LeBron is, endlessly verbally flating him. Like, but Draymond Green's a tough guy. But like, it's just like this stuff is not. It's a distraction. It's not relevant. The Knicks, you're not like if you're upset about this lack of toughness thing, you're not upset about them not being tough. You're not. You're upset that they lost the basketball game. You're upset they lost a basketball game, and that's fine. But say that. Don't spare me all the fucking bullshit about how last year's team was this and that and so many XYZ things, but this year's team is soft and they don't want it. Like, look, toughness can be manifest in all kinds of different ways. And, say whatever you want about this year's team. But one of the reasons why we were like, oh, like everybody loved, every Knicks fan loved last year's team and they're tough and all this stuff is they played a lot. They had to go through a lot, right? Shorthanded, whatever. They played through it. They competed. They were 50-32 at the end of the season, the number 2 seed. But it was hard to not look at that team ultimately, even at the end of the, when they lose to the Pacers at the end of round 2, or even, at the end of the regular season, and feel like, well, they didn't max themselves out. Like, of course they did. Everybody knew, like, they maxed out to the most part, like what you could have reasonably expected from them last season. And this year, I get that it doesn't feel like they've maxed out what they have, but have they not maxed out what they have because of some inherent lack of toughness that is present in them? Or are we talking about, we feel this group has more to give in terms of their output and efficiency and effectiveness on the floor, as an offensive unit, as a defensive unit, with how they're deployed, with how they're used. Like, if that's what we're talking about, then we can talk about that. But when we start, getting into like this stuff about, they can't win because they're not tough, or, they're not this thing, and they don't have an enforcer. Like, what? Like, this enforcer shit is ridiculous. Does anybody watch the NBA in 2025? What fucking enforcers are out there? There's like maybe one guy, and the one guy is Isaiah Stewart. That's it. I don't know another fucking player in the league that runs around and is like hitting people constantly and some real fucking scary tough guy. Like it's
You can
just
say
not
Oklahoma
part
City
of.
and Oklahoma City and Cleveland have more imposing physical presences inside, right? Like Allen is not an enforcer like that, but he's a physical, big, tough guy, right? So is Hartenstein. On Boston, even Horford. So it's not an enforcer, but it's like
Right, but
guys you
it's
won't fuck
yeah,
with, right?
right, but that's a different thing. Like that's not about you know that toughness does matter, and we've talked about that. Like this team needs to be more physical. That's like a thing that we think hopefully Mitchell Robinson at some point will be able to play more than 2.5 minute stints without looking like he's about to fucking pass out on the floor. But we've talked about how Mitch gives you a presence and a physicality that isn't there without him, that was lacking without him. But that's relevant. That's worth talking about. That's a real thing. When we start talking about some like nebulous idea of toughness, like I saw somebody today that was like, oh, we shouldn't have signed PJ Tucker. We should have signed a real enforcer like Marcus Morris. And I'm like, Marcus Morris is the guy that, correct me if I'm wrong, he's the guy that got fucking knocked on his ass by Jokic and did absolutely nothing.
No, that was
Like,
his brother. That was his brother.
okay, but what did Morris do? You do anything? He get any
He got
get
into
back
it.
on?
He got into it with Jokic's brothers on social media. It actually did
Yeah,
become a little bit of a thing.
right. So yeah, social media, like which is not nothing about that is tough. It's just like what are we talking about here? Like if we had Marcus Morris, like would that like what I don't get is like if we win the game yesterday and the same exact shit unfolds, do you think there's any conversation about this team? Oh, this team they're not tough. They lack toughness. No, there wouldn't be any conversation about that because we're not talking about like if you want to talk about could they have won that game yesterday? Yeah, they could have won that game yesterday. But what them losing has almost nothing to do with some lack of toughness. Okay, like that is not what that was about. You lost the game. This is pretty fucking simple. I'm gonna break it down very simply here. You lost the game because of this. Josh Hart had 0 points in 39 minutes, or the hell he fucking played, and you got 4 points off the bench. Total 4 points off the bench. So
And slightly unkind whistle worth
yeah,
mentioning.
sure, yeah, slightly unkind whistle, but forgetting that, you got 4 points off the bench, and one of your 5 starters didn't score a fucking point. So out of your 9 guys that played yesterday, 3 of them didn't score a single point, and 2 of them scored 2. That's why you lost the game. You did not lose the game because nobody stepped to Draymond Green. Like that's not why you lost the game. Like please spare me that stuff because that has nothing to do with it. Because if all it took was to step to Draymond Green to win the game, I mean, like really, that's what we think. Oh man, if like is it like you gave up 97 points to a team that's been on fucking tear? Like is that soft? That was soft? They played soft defense yesterday. They didn't compete. They didn't fight without their best offensive player. They didn't show battle. Like did they? Like I'm not going to sit here and wax poetic about wow what a fucking heroic effort it was. But that's this to me is not like that. Some like the last Cleveland game we played, or any of these like the last couple of Celtics games we played, where we're like you come out and you just get punched in the mouth and there's no response. That's what like to me. If you're talking about being soft or whatever, like that, those games are examples of being soft. Not because the Knicks didn't come out and start throwing punches and setting violent screens or whatever, but because you came out and you took a punch from a team and you did not have a response. Like the Knicks responded throughout the game yesterday. They responded. Now they came up short. Their execution down the stretch was not great, right? Like they couldn't get the like baskets when they needed baskets. They couldn't get stops at the end when they needed the stops. But you can't tell me they didn't compete, that they didn't fight, they didn't scratch and claw in that game because they did. They absolutely did. But they came up short. And I think that's fine. Like we can talk about that. Why did they come up short? What could they have done differently? Could they have done something differently? Why are we still subjected to minutes of Precious Hart and Mitch playing together? Like these are things worth discussing and valid things and things that are much more relevant to maximizing the potential of this group of players and ultimately how realistic, how close, how far, however you want to phrase it, how close are you to a championship? How close are you to competing at that level? Those things are relevant. When we start talking about they lack some toughness because nobody set a moving screen on Draymond yesterday, or they shook his hand after the game. Like, I mean, come on. Like, there's enough actual things to be discussed with this team in terms of what they can do to improve on the floor, that we don't need to reach for stuff like there's some inherent lack of toughness in what they do, because that to me is not really their issue as a group. I don't feel that way anyway. Now, if you view like toughness as far as your willingness to do the dirty work defensively and stuff like that, sure, that stuff is worth discussing. But some again, just this nebulous idea of toughness that is about like, if somebody had thrown a punch at Draymond and we lost the game the same way, I guess we could feel better about ourselves because they were tough or something. But like, I would rather have just won the game no matter how they responded to Draymond, and they didn't do that. And that is ultimately what matters, not that they did not physically assert themselves in this matchup against Draymond in a way that was like, some bad boys Pistons thing.
Yeah, so there's a few things I'd say here. One, in terms of the Knicks not addressing that beyond, Cat took the high road, right? Basically said, I'm going to do me, whatever. Not really worried about that. It's interesting to compare, let's say that after the game, Hart was the one who had the most like vocal response where he's like, Draymond should apologize or whatever. But think about this, right? Like, let's say Cat confronts Draymond, or there's this big fight, or it gets super chippy or something, right? I don't know if it was literally the last time the Knicks played the Lakers, right? I missed this during the game completely. I think it was a viral moment, but LeBron goes up to Stephen A and starts verbally challenging him, right? And Stephen A said afterwards that, this is because, he didn't like the way I was bringing his son into it, and I respect what he did as a father. Stephen A has milked that into this whole fucking media tour, right?
Yeah.
You can bet your ass Draymond would love to squeeze as much engagement out of it. That's why he doesn't feel bad, right? It's getting engagement for his podcast. He doesn't give a shit about what actually happened, or it's not about standards there. It's about getting views. And if Cat drags this out, if somebody else starts going after Draymond, he's just going to milk that. And now you can say, well, that doesn't have to be a distraction for the Knicks, but that's not particularly that's all that happens, right? And the Knicks have bigger goals than that, frankly. And so it was a shitty comment, and Cat obviously wasn't thrilled about it. I don't think he wanted to. He might have,
Look at what Cat said, right? Cat basically was like, I didn't want to respond to it negatively because that's not how I'm going to choose to address it. And like, he talked about stuff that those kids are going
after
through.
Last night, you mean?
No,
the first time, yeah.
Right. And
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if he said anything after the game last night. I didn't see any quotes. Maybe I missed it because I was pretty checked out after the game. But like, to your point, like, if that's how he handled it, how do we know that they didn't talk about it before the game? And he was just like, look, like, we don't need to make this a big thing. I would prefer if we don't make it a big thing. Let's just go out there and try to win the fucking game. And look at how Cat played down the stretch of this game. Like, the guy was out there competing. Like, I mean, throughout the game he was, but you could tell, like, he was playing hard. Like, he was playing really fucking hard. And to kind of use this as some weird thing about like a referendum on the team's toughness is just bizarre to me, because we have no idea what of course I'm sure they talked about it prior to the game during the week or whatever. We have no idea what the conversation is, but they played hard last night. Like, they played very hard last night. They did not come out and embarrass themselves, right? Like, this was not some national TV ass kicking that happened. Like, they battled and they came up fucking short. That happens. Like, it can happen that you play really hard and lose a basketball game. Like we saw them lose a series to the Pacers last year, where I don't think anybody came away from that series being like, they just didn't battle, they didn't fight, they didn't scrap. Like, that's not, and we all think the fucking Pacers are like a soft basketball team, right? But what are we talking about when we say they're soft? It's about shit like, where Halliburton is talking shit to Deuce McBride when Deuce McBride has his back turned to him, right? Or like, just a lack of physicality in their play versus them. I don't know. I don't look at them and think like, I don't know, maybe this is just me. I just don't. Mental toughness and the stuff we talk about, that is so different to me than anything related to like, getting payback on a guy. Like that's not the same thing. And
yeah, I mean it's just stupid dick measuring contest, right? And like that's ultimately, and you've seen teams in the past get baited into that. I mean, you can argue this very player, to the point you made earlier, literally because of a lack of mental toughness and being that tough guy, he might have cost his team a ring, right? I don't think that's unfair to say.
He did cost his team a ring. Like he did. That's real.
So and he's very talented player. He's been very important to them. I mean, it's fun to joke that he rode Steph's coattails. I think Steph was going to have success with a lot of people, but that doesn't take away from his contributions any more than it takes away from Rodman's contributions to the Bulls, right? But I think that the Knicks, what we perceive maybe as a lack of toughness, is them being just focused on. There might be a couple years ago where the Knicks needed that to have their identity, right? There was a play, I'm going way back now, but the year before the Knicks were good, or the year before Tibbs, or maybe 2 years before that, it was the year before. Memphis takes a late three. I think it was Jay Crowder. And then, Alfred Payton didn't like him and shoved him, right? We don't need to rehash any Alfred Payton conversations, but for a team that's really trying to build something, that can be useful, right? That can be like, we're not there talent-wise. We can't hang with these teams, but we have to have some measure of respect, and that could be a way to manifest that. This is a team with much bigger goals than that. So it makes a lot of sense. There's also, to your point, there are conversations we don't hear about. I do want to talk a little bit separately about kind of Hart and Thibodeau going at it. I mean, I think that it was both overblown and also kind of speaks to something that we didn't know was going on. One, I think it's overblown because, of course, players and coaches get into it sometimes. That doesn't mean there's anything brewing, but it also, I think, for people who have complained that Tibbs doesn't seem to hold Hart accountable. Again, he still gave him a lot of minutes. We'll talk about that afterwards. But, so it shows you that we're not always privy to what's going on behind the scenes. I do want to throw two things back at you, though. One is this, right? Yes, other teams don't have an enforcer, but the Knicks realistically are playing with a five who is, who has some limitations, right? As a defender, obviously. One, I do think you can make the argument, like Stewart plays on a team where Jalen Duren has really improved, but defense hasn't necessarily. Even now, I think he's improved to where he's like, much more playable on that end. But that's not really his forte. So Stewart gives you that edge that maybe that you usually would get from the center position without needing that, right? So I'd be curious if you think that because of the Knicks construct, that's a little bit more needed. The second thing I'd bring up, I do want to get back to this because people are comparing this team to last year. The Knicks will have to go 500 to match last year's win total. And if you compare it to the team as a whole or the team that finished the year, I totally agree this year's team is more equipped. There was that 14-2 stretch. So I guess I am curious, like, do you think, because I remember we podcasted then, and I think a lot of us were thinking if this team stays healthy with OG, with Precious, with Randall being able to play together, they have, there could be, they could be a championship contender. If you have to compare this team to that, like, and again, small sample size, whatever, to what we saw from that team, do you think that's a fair comparison for someone to say, well, they're not quite on that level?
As last year's team?
As that last year's, when they were completely healthy, 14-2 or whatever it was with OG right after the trade.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be true. Like, again, it's so hard because they looked amazing for that month. Obviously, the schedule was favorable to them in that month.
They weren't completely scouted, right? It's a very
and it's 1 month, so it's hard to say for sure. But like, let's say that was their true level. Sure, you could convince me that team is better than this year's team, but like, I don't know. Again, once Hartenstein chooses to leave in free agency, I don't really know what fans would have totally wanted them to do there. Like, now, if you want to say Mikal wasn't worth the picks, fine. Mikal's not worth the picks. Okay. Like, I'll let's just go with that, right? Let's say, okay, Mikal wasn't worth it. that was an overpay, so they could have done something else. Fine, let's say that's true. They didn't have a starting center. Like, Mitch was out. Mitch, as we know, Mitch has only just come back in the last month. Their only other centers on the roster were Ariel Hukporti and Jericho Sims, who's on the Bucks now and not with us. I don't really know what, like, I just struggle with kind of comparing them, but I guess, like, if you want to say last year's team was better equipped, sure, I can see that. But what I would also say is, like, I don't know how we can, like, it seems largely the case that a lot of people feel Tibbs is not getting the most out of this group and that there's more that he can be doing to optimize their output as a collective. So if that's true, then, I mean, are we sure that they just don't have any ability to win a championship? Like, because I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff going on there where it's like players have to take responsibility for their performance for sure on an individual level. But if we also feel like there's examples of their talent being suppressed because of, whatever, how they're being used, the setup, the schemes, rotations, whatever way you think is the most pertinent, then I'm not sure we're getting a good read on this group. And again, I hate to keep using them as an example because I'm sure people will be like, you're kind of cherry picking with this one, but that's the case with the Cavs, right? Where you're like, okay, well, maybe that's really all they needed is a different coach to give them a better platform, to utilize their talents and blend their stuff together and get to a higher level. Maybe that's all it took. Maybe it just took that and a couple of shrewd signings in free agency after you had a chance to build up your depth for a year or two. And that's really all it took. Because that's kind of what my feeling is about this team and has been my feeling about this team since the offseason. Like, I think that they need some time to replenish their depth. But I do think they are. I don't think they are as far off as some of these games against Boston and Cleveland have made them look. I think they're closer than that. And I think part of the reason they have looked as badly as they have is some poor decisions from Tom Thibodeau, in terms of how he's managing his lineups and rotations, and then also just on a broad level, how he's utilizing some of this talent. I mean, it's really hard for me to watch Mikal Bridges in these games without Brunson and feel like I don't know. It's just very weird for me to watch these games without Brunson with OG and Mikal playing like they have been playing and feel like, well, the reason they've been lesser than that with Brunson is just like, I mean, I guess the best way to put it is like, are you really getting the most out of them with Brunson? And isn't that the goal? Like, the goal, and I'm not saying you're going to get, OG's going to get up 29 and Mikal's going to average 20. And like, I'm not saying that's what it looks like, but they have to be more involved. And until they're more involved, I don't think you're going to get the best out of this group. And then on top of that, you can talk about, well, why are you getting more out of them defensively right now? And how important is Deuce McBride to that? His ability to defend the point of attack and allow them to be more of help defenders, roaming, covering the gaps. Like, I don't, there's a lot to kind of chew off and look at. And, look, I think no fan base seems to need the offseason more than this one does, because I've never seen a fan base be this fucking insane about a team that's 42-24. But yeah, I just think that, like, there's a lot to consider. There's a lot to chew, digest, and kind of hash out after the season.
You should have stayed with the metaphor,
Yeah. But yeah, I just think there's a lot to really kind of examine and think about, in a way that's hard to do in season. Like, I'm guilty of it too, right? Like, oh my God, I can't believe Tibbs is failing this team so hard. I've said, I'm sure I've gone over the top on Tibbs from at points this season. And while I think, like, my criticism is fair, in terms of like the substance of it, I'm sure I can go over the top. And there are things he's like, I am encouraged actually by this last 5 games. I know they're only 2-3 in those 5 games, but what I see from them defensively, that makes me feel good because I'm like, this was like, we didn't see this consistently night after night after night at any point this season. And I don't think it's just about Brunson's out, so now you're playing all good defenders or whatever. Like, I think there's more going on to it than that, because if you look at it, the first game they played in this trip in this sequence was against the Lakers, right? And that was a game that was 99-99 at the end of regulation. The Knicks played a really good defensive game. They obviously, again, did not close the deal out, which, of course, everybody's getting frustrated by that, rightfully so. But there are things that he's doing well, right? Like that I think we're seeing improvement in. Is that enough? Is that all we need to see? Like, it's hard to answer those questions, and I don't think we'll have a full ability to answer any of these questions until we see them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, you also, we've talked about how long. I mean, Tatum got drafted, 2017?
Yeah.
2018? So it took them that long, right? You can argue that they've made it past the second round earlier or whatever. But there were some, I mean, they went down 3-0 to the same Miami team we lost to, came back and lost, right? I mean, the Celtics were a better team. That was their year in many ways. I think if they made the finals, the Heat lost to, who did the Heat lose to?
The Nuggets.
Yeah, I think the Celtics would have put up a much better fight, right? So you would be rightfully very upset. And they've had all of these teams have had moves fall into their lap, right?
They also lost in the finals to the Warriors in 2022 as favorites.
Yeah, but all of these teams, they stole Porzingis, right? No, I want to. They saw a good buy low opportunity. Like, his value was not high. It's a risk with an injured player. They did deserve credit for that, right? But they were able to get off Marcus Smart in what looks like at the time, it looks like a much better trade than it did at the time, right? By the way, that's another team that was like, oh, they lost Marcus Smart, Shwin? How didn't they lose all their toughness? How were they able to win?
No, and hands up. I questioned that. I was like, I thought something was off with them after they lost Marcus Smart. Now getting Drew Holiday, obviously that helps. And the fact is also not just getting Drew Holiday, but not needing to rely on him as a primary or secondary offensive option the way that Milwaukee had needed from him, right?
I mean, he's 5th now, I think, with White's ascension. That's another thing, right? They've had, so a lot of it's tough to predict what's going to happen. And I think people are talking about the picks a lot. Listen, look at the Heat even, right? They've extended this run. It's now starting to look kind of bad, but you find ways, right? Good front offices find ways to get out of corners, right? I don't think they're in a corner, but they've shown the ability to navigate that. I do think it's the last point I'll make on this, like, mental toughness thing or whatever. But you talk about toughness, right? No one questioned Julius Randle's toughness, right? And he's had great performances where he like whenever he plays a bonus, he seems to take that personally. He's also had performances where he spirals out of control, right? I mean, you look at how Cat just kind of played his game. There might be a chance that Julius Randle decides, I'm going to fucking stick it to Draymond, and then he has 6 turnovers at halftime, right? We've seen that before. And Randle doesn't get into beefs really or anything like that. But, I think Cat is not as, he is expressive. That's the wrong word. But
even to the point you're making about Randle, do you remember at the end of one of these games in 2021-22 where he went after Rudy Gobert? And it's like, okay, I mean, I guess that's tough, but it was so unproductive, right? They could just
what is it? Yeah.
What is it? What did it achieve? I don't know. Nothing.
And again, maybe it did achieve something earlier on, right? When the Knicks were trying to build a foundation, but your goals are different now. But we've talked a lot about that. In terms of the adjustments, I think that there's just, I brought up the Ewing theory, half joking on this record. I don't think that's what's happening here. But on offense, right? The thing is this, right? When you have such a great player like Jalen Brunson, I don't even know if this is a tips thing or what, but if you're Bridges or OG, you might be thinking, like, every time I get the ball, there's an opportunity cost, right? I can't fuck this up because otherwise I'm costing Brunson a shot, and that's generally a better shot. Now, right, if Bridges or OG tries to do something, it's like, look, if I miss, it's not like we're going to get a better shot, right? This is why campaign is so empowered in this role, because it's like, okay, yeah, I jacked up a three. What else do you think we were getting? We're here. This is, in the words of Stanley from The Office, this is a run out the clock situation. We are just trying to get a decent shot and get Brunson or get the starter some rest. So I do wonder how can you maintain that ability to play free even after Brunson comes back? I hope it sticks, because I really think that could really unlock the ceiling. And there's an argument for it. You could say they were winning with Brunson, but the offense, as you and I have talked about, did crater over the last month or two, right? I think in terms of toughness, Mitchell Robinson is changing a lot. I think that like the on-off has been really good. I think Macri, Jonathan Macri from Knicks Film School, posted the Knicks over the last 9 games have the second best defensive rating, behind only Toronto, which also has a couple former Knicks. So I think Robinson helps, but he doesn't play a ton of minutes. But I do think that, they're also starting to get closer together. But I think as his conditioning improves, I think that's a bigger factor in those Cleveland and Boston series than even I was willing to admit it. I think I've been higher on Mitch than a lot of other folks. But I think when it comes down to it, right, the journey of this Knicks team over the last 2 seasons has been, they were poor. If you remember the beginning of last season, people, they were getting blown out by Milwaukee, by Boston, right? There were 2 straight in the in-season tournament where Brunson played really well, but they're giving up 130, 140 points. Both those teams are just generating open threes. Giannis gets free rolls to the paint. They tried to solve that by saying, by getting OG, right? And for a while it worked. And then you have Randall get injured. And then by the end of the season, but I think that the Randall injury did 2 things. One, it showed that Brunson is capable of hitting an insane level, right? And so it tells you, like, how much do we need Randall? Can we pivot to another space? And the other thing we realized is that, they are way too reliant on Brunson, right? Because, the team is going to break down. But I think more than that, it was like, yeah, like, look, injuries happen, and they just had some bad luck last year. To your point, I think, yeah, like, we have to remember the Hartenstein thing was kind of out of their control. There wasn't much they could do to keep him. That forces your hand. And at that point, we still hadn't seen Randall perform at a decent level. If you look at Cat's career numbers, I've said this a bunch. Look at Cat's career playoff numbers. It's like 18 and 10 on 58 true shooting. Randall hasn't even done that for a series, and that's considered playoff dropping for Cat, right? So, we made all these moves. You're kind of in that intermediate place. And teams will get better. I think Cleveland, I have actually brought them up too. I'm with you. I think it's a good example of patience, and nothing is an apples to apples comparison. But, they had certain avenues, like Mobley is now shooting close to 40% from 3, plays with a lot more force on offense. Garland and Mitchell seem to have, balanced each other out as best as you can. And they got DeAndre Hunter in a move that you wouldn't have expected them to get, right? So those are things that I think the Knicks can do. I do want to get back to so we saw that Hart Tibbs exchange on the sideline. And this is a conversation we've avoided on here. I think it's a conversation that gets beaten to death. But it's tough not to look at, to your point, just how important the impact of Deuce McBride is. Especially on defense, right? I like Jeff from Hot Hand Theory and the Strickland, obviously. But Jeff was saying on Twitter that, Frank Barrett, for those who know him, he was saying that he's watched every Warriors game, which I believe, this season. And he said there's maybe 2 guys who did a better job on Steph than Deuce. That is an incredible weapon, especially when the guy can knock down threes. We know what his offensive limitations are. But those are 2 things that you're not getting from Hart. And, Hart has been struggling. You don't want to hurt his confidence, but sometimes it can help a guy like that to move to the bench and not have to operate in this environment where he's also being asked to. Hart is best when he's not a floor spacer, right? Hart is probably at his best when he can get in transition, where he can play a little fast and loose on defense, take risks, play with higher energy, right? Because maybe he's playing 25, 30 minutes. But I do think it's worth having that conversation at this point that, again, a lot of the criticism of Hart has felt unfair from the fan base, but it's been an extended period where you just look like the team is better with maybe those guys in different roles. So, if you don't want to talk through that again, I understand. And it's not saying that Tibbs is some idiot for not doing it, but I do think we're at the point now where I think it's a conversation worth having for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. The Hart thing is just, I don't really know what to say anymore about it because it feels like kind of pointless almost. Like there's nothing that Tibbs is doing and has done to indicate to me that he wants to or he's considering reducing his role, switching things up, whatever. Like nothing about it is trending that way. There has been very little of that. So I don't know. Like, would I like to see Deuce McBride start over him at this point? Yeah, but not. And it's like not even because I think starting Hart is so egregious that we can't overcome it, or like because of how he is running the rotations. If Hart starts, you're not going to get a lot of Deuce McBride minutes alongside Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and Karl-Anthony Towns. That's just not going to happen.
So what do you think? Do you think the bigger issue is the way he runs those rotations, or just that the starting lineup itself is not that good?
Look, the starting lineup hasn't been that good either. So that's part of the argument as well. But I'm saying that's of less importance to me than the fact that he's not, or has not so far this season, shown a willingness to kind of adapt to that reality and be more proactive about getting Deuce on the floor and playing him in different lineups. And again, it's not just about Deuce in place of Hart with starters. Like I feel like I've said this 1,000 times. It's just about getting Deuce on the floor more in different lineups that all have shown a lot of promise. And that can be with Hart too. We've seen it with Hart. Like there are lineups with Hart and Deuce that are great. So it's not about just one guy for one guy. It's about the whole thing. And if Tibbs is going to run his lineups the way he's running and run his rotations the way he's running them, then yeah, I mean, the only way you're really going to get that is with Hart come off the bench and Deuce starting. But, is it going to happen? I don't think so. I don't see any indication of that. It's really all there is to say about it. Like, I don't know what else there is to say about it. He is running his team. Yep.
Is there an argument to be made that the precious Hart Mitch minutes, which we sadly did get anyway, is there an argument that if you start Hart, you at least keep him away from those guys who do kind of?
But these are all things that are under his control. That's my point. Like what we're talking about, I'm not saying you're doing this, but it's like this conversation is so backwards to me because what we're doing is we're talking about it as if like Tibbs has no agency in restricting this stuff. So all he can do is minimize it. So like, I mean, if him coming off the bench is going to result in more of those minutes, that's on Tibbs. Like that's on Tibbs. I'm sorry. Like that has nothing to do with, it's not as if this is an unavoidable thing. I mean, I'm just going to look up at the minutes from last night's game. But, if you're playing, all right, so let's look at this. Last night, okay, Knicks Warriors. This is the box score, all right. Mikal Bridges, 38 minutes. OG Anunoby, 38 minutes. Karl-Anthony Towns, 30. Deuce, 38. Josh Hart, 39. Then off the bench, Shamet, 21. Payne, 10. Mitch, 16. Precious, 10. If you're playing your starters that many minutes, and you're getting 16 minutes from Mitchell Robinson, and you're getting 21 minutes from Landry Shamet, you should not ever be in a situation where Precious has to play, and he has to play 10 minutes. Like, if you want to tell me, okay, well, Towns is in foul trouble, and Mitch only played 16 minutes, so I needed Precious to eat some minutes at center, fine. That's like maximum, because you went double big or whatever. Like, yeah, you're talking about like 3-4 minutes tops. He played 10 minutes, and most of that was at the 4. I think all of that was at the 4, if I remember correctly. So, like, he's not even really trying to avoid it. But my issue is when Brunson's back. This is a very simple thing. When Brunson is back, there is no reason to play Precious Achiuwa unless both Cat and Mitch Robinson are in foul trouble, or one or the other is in foul trouble, and you just need him to eat a couple minutes. That's it. He should not play because you have 9 guys then, right? You would have Brunson, you would have Deuce McBride, you would have Josh Hart, you'd have Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson, Landry Shamet, Cam Payne. That's 9 guys. Now, would it be nice if Shamet was taller? Sure. Like, would it be nice if Payne or Deuce were a little bit taller so that they could, like, you could use them more alongside Brunson in all matchups?
I mean, I wish they were tallers. I wish they were ballers,
Right. Like, yeah, all that stuff is fine, but this is what you have. Like, this is my frustration. I'm like, every conversation tends to come down to like, well, we still don't have this thing. Okay, we don't have these things. This is your fucking roster for the rest of the season. There's nothing else to be done here. This is your roster. The trade deadline is done. We know they're limited in what they can do in terms of signing free agents or whatever. This is your roster. Play your best, the best version of your roster. Play the best version of it. The best version of your roster does not involve playing Precious Achiuwa at the 4. And it probably doesn't involve Josh Hart starting, and certainly does not involve Josh Hart getting fucking LeBron James treatment. Like, this logic of, this is what he said, right? This is, the whole Mikal-Gate thing. One of the things Tim said was like, well, Josh, he just, like, he never wants to come out of the game. Okay. Like, so because Josh never wants to come out of the game, that's why he never comes out of the game? What is he? Like, that makes no sense. That's terrible logic. That's like,
I'm sure Quickly didn't want to come out of the game either, right? But you got no problem taking him out.
Most guys, a lot of guys don't want to come out of the game. You take them out of the game because of there are two reasons, right? Okay, I want to get this guy rest, or the other reason, he's not playing well enough right now. He's not giving us. I mean, like, I'm not.
And those two may not be unrelated, right? I mean, Hart might play better, especially given his skill set, without having to play 40 minutes every night. Even if he thinks that there's no let up there.
Well, I don't even think it's about what Josh Hart thinks. I think he's genuinely just a guy who's going to be like, if you ask him, hey, are you good? He's going to be like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, I'll play. That doesn't mean that, oh, well, he says he's good, so he has to play. Like it's one thing if LeBron is like, nah, don't take me out. I'm good. Versus like if Josh Hart's telling you that. Like, I'm sorry. Hey, Josh, you might be good, but right now we're going to go with something else. And he's not going to get upset. I guarantee you he's not going to lose his mind over that either. So, look, I have no idea what the necessary, I don't know what specifically their argument on the bench was yesterday. I don't particularly care. I don't think it's that serious of a thing. These guys have a pretty good relationship, obviously, as we know. Maybe too good of a relationship in some ways, as we know. So actually seeing like them butting heads a little bit, I was kind of like, all right, maybe that's healthy. Maybe that's good. That's like showing that they're not just like, always in it. Yeah, just like totally in agreement at all times, right? That's not a bad thing. I'm fine with that. Like, I don't care about that. I think, again, to the point of like toughness, right? Like, there's something to be said about butting heads because you're both kind of intense about the game, right? Like, you're intensely invested in winning the game. Like, that part doesn't, I don't care about that shit at all. But, like, I don't know, the Hart usage, it's just frustrating. Like, we've talked about it endlessly, and I don't know that there's anything more to be said than what has already been said about it. But what I think is the argument for bringing Josh Hart off the bench and to credit, you mentioned Jeff earlier, he brought this up at the start of the season, and I totally believe it now. But like, you watch the way the starting line, like we've talked about, hey, how can we get more to Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, these guys, right? Okay, well, isn't one way to just take Josh Hart out of the lineup? Because Josh Hart, if he's on the floor, he has to have the ball quite a bit, given how teams are defending him and just the nature of his game. He's going to have the ball in his hands quite a bit. So that immediately means Mikal gets the ball less. OG gets the ball less. Now, if you start Deuce McBride is not really similar at all to Josh Hart. Right? He's a very different player. What he does that Josh Hart doesn't do, he's a willing 3-point shooter, a capable 3-point shooter. That matters. He's willing to shoot above the break. That matters. He doesn't need the ball in his hands, right? He has value offensively without the ball in his hands because he's an effective spacer, and teams are not just going to put a center on him and have their center roam off to the other side of the floor to effectively send doubles at Karl-Anthony Towns when he's posting up or facing up or whatever. You're not allowing teams just have their center roam defensively. So there's a value to that. There's a value to the fact that Josh Hart, as I just mentioned, like he's somebody whose value offensively is tied into having the ball in his hands a lot. Well, guess what? I think the bench could probably use that.
They could more than he can use Deuce, right? That's yeah. Deuce. We always get frustrated at Deuce because with the bench he can't create, and it results in campaign shots. Yeah, to your point, it helps both units.
Right. So I think Hart gives that unit juice that they don't have consistently. And then the final piece, again, this has been the main argument for me, is the most frustrating part of that starting lineup has been how poor at times they've been defensively, how much less the sum of their parts they've been defensively. And it's we there's been conversation throughout the year, right, of like, man, Mikal Bridges, he's not living up to the cost of getting him, and OG Anunoby, is he really delivering on what the Knicks paid him in free agency? And I think part of the reason is they are not being put in their optimal defensive roles when Josh Hart is starting, because you're having Mikal Bridges have to chase around the point of attack constantly. And then you have one high-level wing defender at that point in OG Anunoby who's being asked to do all kinds of different things, too many things. And Josh Hart has been bad defensively throughout a lot of this season. So you're not getting the most out of that group collectively on the defensive side of the ball. You put you put Deuce McBride there. Now you have two good point of attack defenders, but Deuce being able to be a quality point of attack defender means Mikal Bridges now has less on his plate defensively, which can, one, help him have a little bit more impact as a help defender, right? But also helps you offensively because now maybe Mikal has more to give on that side of the ball. And again, as I mentioned previously, because Deuce is a more effective spacer, there's more space for everybody to operate. I don't really see the argument anymore to keep starting Josh Hart, aside from, and this is I don't mean this facetiously, I think this is a real thing. Unless there's some political, managing the locker room stuff going on there where it's I can't really bench Hart because it's not going to play well in the locker room or whatever. That might be real. That might be true. And I'm speculating here, by the way. I don't know that this is the reason or is a reasoning or is part of the reasoning of starting out Josh Hart. But I'm not sure what the argument is at this point from just a pure X's and O's value to the lineup, maximizing the upside of the group. I'm not sure what the argument is to continue to start Josh Hart when Brunson gets back, aside from I guess the two would be we're maybe underestimating the importance of the rebounding he provides. Maybe that's true. Could be. I'm not denying that. I'm saying that could be one reason. And then the other reason might be that, that his ability to create a little bit off the on ball reduces what you're asking from Brunson, although that hasn't really seemed to be the case so far recently. Aside from that, I don't really know what the argument is. I don't. Not sure. But I'm open to suggestions.
And the way that, I mean, it would be it'd be something, if you used Hart as a screener, DHOs with Brunson, right? So you can say that, you want to have Brunson do more stuff off ball. Having a guy like Hart helps. I wonder how much of it is because there is that chemistry the three of them have, the Villanova guys. I mean, so keeping them together in the lineup. I do think Hart and Bridges have good chemistry in transition. But if you can't get stops, you're not going to get into transition, right? And against these top teams, I think, to your point, the fact that we just don't try as many different lineups, we're not mixing guys in and out, that is, I think, the biggest concern. because there's other things that we might not even think about, right? Like if you're doing these hockey line shifts, and if Precious is playing all his minutes at the 4, well, that means that like Cat and Mitch, I think, is a very promising combo that we want to learn a lot more about. We don't have a chance against Cleveland if you don't see Cat play next to Mitch. That is, would you agree with that, by the way? I think that's the key to beating, to having any chance against the Cavs.
And actually, I finish this point, but I had somebody kind of bring up something interesting to me about what are the biggest needs for the Knicks in the offseason and how this pertains to this conversation. But sorry, continue what you were saying.
Yeah, so I think that's how you can match the Cavs inside, and have some rim protection. But we don't get to see those kind of lineups. I think part of what Jeff had said earlier is it's not just that Hart gives more juice to the bench. It's also when he plays with the starters, you have to sit your three best wings. He's one of your three best wings, right? All have to sit at the same time. So especially with the way it's constructed now, you're basically at that point, you're going to have to play either Precious at the 4 or Shamet at the 4. We can debate that, but one thing that could alleviate that is staggering Hart, right? So you don't necessarily have to bench him and OG at the same time. You don't have to bench Mikal and OG at the same time. But even to make that work, you would have to be more willing to bring guys in and out, after 5 or 6 minutes, right? Or shorter stints to like navigate. Because the thing is this, right? You're going to have a lot of weird, especially when your roster is not that deep, right? You're going to have some, I guess, quote unquote, weird lineups, right? Or some guys, you don't want to have to play Landry Shamet 20 minutes. You don't want to have to play Precious much, right? But that's kind of the whole reason to move guys in and out more, to mitigate some of the damage of those lineups. And the fact that he's unwilling to do that is a bit of a concern. We've seen him be willing to stagger and do things in the past, so maybe it's something that can improve, and maybe this Brunson injury will unlock it out of him. But yeah, I think that that would be another benefit from Hart, being a super sub. I'm not even saying he should play less than 30 minutes, but
no, I think he look, there's basically 6 guys that we are 100% certain are like that should be 100 like in the rotation, right? Obviously, we know Brunson, OG, Mikal, Cat, Hart, and Deuce. Like that's it. Those are 6 guys that I'm
Mitch
like
when he's healthy, I would say.
Right, Mitch is a unique thing, and I don't expect him to play 30 minutes. Right, but those 6 guys between the minutes at 1 to 4, and then obviously Cat can play the 5 as well. Like those are 6 guys that should be, however you want to manage those minutes, they can make up those groups. So Hart is and will and should still be playing. He should be getting 30 minutes minimum, basically, even if he came off the bench. I mean, I think you can still play him 35 minutes off the bench if need be. Like if he's going well, it's all about the game itself, right? Like if Josh Hart's playing well, nobody's gonna be like, take him off the floor. Like that's not what we're talking about. And Tibbs has the trust in him where if he is playing well, he'll 100% just close with him, right? But it's about understanding when he's not playing well, he doesn't need to be out there. Like everybody else has this. Like Mikal Bridges has this, right? Oh, he's not playing well. We've seen him get benched. Josh Hart, for whatever reason, seems to be a made man to the level that basically nobody other than Brunson is. And it's very frustrating because it does make you at times like kind of pick on him, right? Because you're like, what the fuck? Like this guy's not giving us anything right now. Why is he still out on the floor? And it feels a little gratuitous at times, but it's not because I don't think, for the most part, I don't think it's because people are like, Josh Hart sucks. It's more like this usage of Josh Hart sucks currently. And that is, to me, that's like the biggest kind of question for the rest of the season the Knicks have is like, can Tibbs get to a point where he's able to like just play the unit that is playing the best in a given game? Play the lineups that are going to give you the best chance of success within situations in games, be it individual possessions late in games or stretches at, in the 4th quarter or 3rd quarter, or whatever it is. But that just has not been the case so far this season. He's been reluctant to kind of coach to the game that's unfolding in front of him and more rolling with the lineup that he trusts and with the guys he trusts the most, regardless of how they may be playing in the game. And I got to be clear, last night, look, Josh didn't have it last night. He was really bad. But, like, Shamit didn't play particularly well yesterday. Campaign didn't play particularly well yesterday. I don't know that, and Mitch right now is not able to play a high number of minutes. So he was limited in his options. And, I get the frustration at times with Josh, but I personally didn't have too much of an issue with the minutes specifically yesterday, given the options. My concerns are more about the minutes when Brunson is back, because that's what we've seen. What we've seen so far this year is that, it doesn't really matter how Josh is playing or how teams are defending him or whatever. Josh is going to be out there closing the game no matter what. And I just don't know that needs, or I don't even forget needs to be, but I don't think that should be the case.
You said you had a point on Mitch and Cat.
Yeah. Somebody was asking, I think it was Kenny Meir. He asked me, what do I think is the most important thing for the Knicks to do this offseason? And is it like, do we need a bigger point of attack defender who can kind of replicate what Deuce gives us, but obviously has, better size, so you're matching up better against more teams, not giving up size mismatches? Or is it getting a 4 that can play next to Cat, like a legit 4 that can play next to Cat? And where I don't know that you actually, like, what if the 4 that we need to play next to Cat isn't really the thing we need, and it's really just we need Mitch to get back to like a normal level of minutes so that Cat can be the 4 and open that up. Like, because I think what we're really talking about is we need to have a double big lineup with Cat that is effective. When you say like we need like a real 4, right? It's like, it's okay. So you want another big that basically that can play next to Cat. And, that possibility might just exist on this roster, except it's that Cat is nominally the 4 in that lineup. And, look, this is why I thought it was a mistake not to play Huck Porty more earlier in the season, especially next to Cat, given kind of his size and frame and what we saw from him, what he flashed. The minutes that we did see them play together, which was very, very minimal, to be clear, but it looked promising. I think the minutes we've seen with Cat and Mitch together so far have looked promising. So I don't know that we need to really go out and get a 4. I think what we really need is just the level of center minutes next, be, off the bench or next to whatever, be it Mitch and Huck Porty or somebody else in Huck Porty or whatever. We just need to have a center or centers that can play next to Cat and allow Cat to play the 4. That's kind of, I thought that was an interesting question, and though, because I was like, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a guy we've talked about, but it's like, is if that's not feasible, which probably isn't feasible because players of that ilk don't normally get traded unless they're managed. Their GM is Nico Harrison, but like, if maybe you don't need to go get a 4, maybe you just need 5s so that Cat can play the 4 more.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Mitch, it's just tough to bet on anything long term. I mean, the question hasn't really been on his ability when healthy. It is just how much that caveat, creates issues, right? So you don't have to roll with Mitch, and I still think they will look for value trades. But I think it is becoming increasingly clear, like you at least want that look, right? Where you can you want to be able to play multiple ways. I do think that, to Kenny's point, like it could, an equivalent solution, I think you're kind of saying this too, is a power forward, but OG's 6'9" and not a great rebounder, right? So a power forward that's 6'10", 6'11", right? Maybe even a guy like Tari Eason. I'm not saying he's available. Even then, though, I think you're really asking, what you really are missing with Cat so desperately is that rim protection. You can even, I mean, there's lots of teams that play drop only bigs, right? That find success, right? One way to mitigate that, by the way, is exactly what the Knicks did yesterday, where you had Deuce chasing Steph over a ton of screens. I mean, Steph Curry is Steph Curry, so he still exploited Cat a bunch of times. But how many times did you see Deuce getting around? Sometimes, hey, they're the Warriors. It's not like they set 100% legal screens and just great contests. Even had like a block, I think, on Steph. But getting back to what we were talking about, I do think, to your point, like that versatile 6'10", 6'11" power forward who can protect the rim, who can space enough. Like those guys maybe even play a little bit the five when Cat is out. I think those guys are tougher to find than a five, because it's not like keeping Mitch or keeping a true five means you're never going to play Cat there, right? But now you're allowing him to play both positions. To Kenny's point, maybe you still want another four, but you don't have that. They might not have to be the center, right? It might just be, it could be TJ Warren, right? Or it could be, a version of PJ Tucker that isn't completely washed, right? I'm just throwing things out there. I think that starting caliber of 4 or 5 is tougher to find though than a straight 5 like Mitch. This is why they went after Walker Kessler, right? And we know, I forgot who reported it, but it was someone pretty reputable. And the Knicks at the deadline were trying to get Walker Kessler. I do think they see that as like the best way to kind of maintain the versatility Cat gives you, but while also being able to, when you need to, have some oomph at the rim to protect him.
Yeah, and not just at the rim, but also like, I mean, you think about what Mitch does when he's really when he's at his best, and what somebody like Walker Kessler provides too, is that ability to like, hey, you know what? You can't just stick your center on Cat when he's at the 4, because our center, if you put a smaller guy on him, he's gonna kill you on the glass. He's gonna own the glass. So I
Hart
think
does a little bit that, but it's not the same, obviously, as Mitch.
Yeah, it's different when it's a center. And also like Hart can't overpower another center, right? Like, so it's just a different dynamic. So, you got to keep your center on our center, and Cat's got a size mismatch at the 4, and also Cat is a really good offensive rebounder himself. So, you can kind of bludgeon teams. You have that option as well when you have that double big lineup. So, yeah, I mean that's what I think. Like the Knicks really, I think they need that, and I think they need a bigger win. And then, maybe, we can, again, we don't need to rehash it, but there's stuff that I think is available to them with the roster they have that could be unlocked with some more creative and more optimized game strategies. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And, but I think you're probably not far off from the front office's thinking. So the draft was before the Cat trade, right? It was after Bridges, before Cat, right? I believe was this.
Yes.
Bridges,
correct.
draft, Cat. And I don't think they knew for sure, but I think it was pretty much an open secret they were going to lose Hartenstein at that point by the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I don't think they knew, but they were hedging for sure.
Yeah. And so what did they do in the draft, right? You can say these are late picks. Maybe there's not a whole lot of thought that goes into them. They picked 2 wings, right? Even 2 wings on different timelines, right? McCullough is the older, more mature. We're starting to see him get some burn in Westchester and then really be productive. They take a project wing with a lot more upside. They take another, you didn't mention this now, but yes, people have mentioned that you would ideally like some more creation off the bench. They take a point guard. We could argue about whether he was the right pick or whatever. They take a point guard, and then they take a center. So they've done a true center, right? So you can say, draft isn't necessarily, the best, but I think if you're looking at what their mindset was, it's probably pretty similar to what you're suggesting right now. And I do think, yeah, like if they can get Herb Jones or something, they'll do that in a heartbeat. Those guys are just tough to get, right? Trey Murphy, but he's not really a forward, but those kind of really versatile fours. I wrote a long time ago an article for the Strickland about how like versatile fours who can do a bunch of these things, wing stuff and big stuff, are really good, are really helpful, and teams value them pretty appropriately considering that. It's why a guy like Kyle Kuzma gets valued more than I know you would ever value him. But that's why you can get a guy like Chris Middleton for him. Even though he's far from the perfect version of that archetype. So I do think that they're probably like bearing in mind that, the opportunity cost and all of that, they will probably look to long-term have a 5 who can play at least 20, 25 minutes next to Cat. And I think, and I think they recognize the wing depth problem as much as anyone. If you look at everyone they've brought in, Tucker's not really a wing, but you have the draft picks, you have Warren, who they've clearly had interest in. They're clearly trying to plug those holes. We'll see what happens to Dadier if he's a year away or 2 years away. And I think there is still, they brought in Payne, they kicked the tires on DeLon Wright. I think they were going to move Sims no matter what because they have a good relationship. We know that when guys are kind of out of the rotation, whether it's Obi, whether it's Sims, even quickly to an extent, you could argue they gave him the chance to have his own team. They do right by. I still think they would trade Sims no matter what. I don't think they were super enamored by DeLon Wright, but you saw what they targeted. It was a little more bench creation, right? So I think they're thinking along the same lines as most of us. And it'd just be interesting to see how they navigate it. How much can they rely on development from the young guys? How much do they think they can rely on Mitch, health-wise, long-term? And if there's any other internal, I think the 6 guys you mentioned kind of are what they are. If that's the Knicks core 6, right? Cat is not going to turn into some great defender. He's probably not going to. I think there's probably. You would like him to pass a little bit more out of drives, but it's not really that he's a selfish player. It's just once he gets his drive started, it's just not his game to be able to stop and make a live dribble, which someone like Randall can do. Brunson is improving every year, but how much, it's not a whole lot more, right? Maybe continue to up the 3-point volume, go full Dame, I guess. But those internal improvements from your core 6 are probably kind of all saturated for the most part. Maybe Bridges has a little bit more as a creator. But those are all incremental things. They're not going to change the game. I think you probably want one more wing who, to your point, is really helpful. And just a reliable person to play next to Cat, depending on the opponent for 15, 20 minutes is a big. And then I think the bench creator thing, that is to me of those things the least of the concerns. But you have avenues even with the roster, right? You can use Bridges more at the bench. Maybe Kolek improves. Deuce is still only 24. Maybe Dante kind of grew into that role where he could run a little bit of point for the bench. So I think that I would agree on those. But I think, when you look at Mitch and Cat together, just how imposing that is to the point where you can bully teams, right? You want that physical identity. If you're playing 4 different shooters next to Mitch, his spacing doesn't hurt you that much because, again, this is not like a 6'4" guy being left open on the perimeter. This is a guy that, all right, if you want to leave me, if you want to put a guard on me, or if you want to kind of ignore me, you are not going to have fun because he's gonna just vacuum up offense. Is it weird to say I think he's improved even? When he's in the area, he's getting the rebound now. It wasn't even that much of a slam dunk last year, no pun intended. So, I would generally agree. And I that's one thing that I think is exciting for this year is if you get Mitch up to 20 minutes a game in the playoffs. I still think against Boston, it's tough because they're just great at executing against the Knicks' specific weaknesses. And I don't mean this to shortchange Cleveland. I think they're a superior team to us. I think they can match up well with Boston or Oklahoma City or anyone else. So I'm not saying that, but I would be interested. That gives us more of a fighting chance, I think, in that series, especially if deployed properly.
Yeah, the Mitch thing will definitely be interesting to track as we come to the close of the season, how he's able to ramp up his minutes, and then obviously the minutes next to Cat. That seems like a really, really important sample to get. Speaking of important, we have not talked about this at all today, but it is worth mentioning. Obviously, Mikal had his comments during the week. Tibbs responded. We already know about that. I thought Tibbs' response was rather odd because even if he's right, let's just say he's telling the truth and him and Mikal never had the conversation. He had the opportunity to kind of just be like, we talked about it, and it's just something that we'll have to continue to take a look at. Or there's things you can say, right? But he didn't really diffuse it. he actually went the complete opposite, basically said Mikal was lying, more or less. Whatever. They talked about, apparently they had a conversation before the Portland game. Mikal, he plays great against Portland, hits the game winner at the buzzer. I thought he played pretty solid yesterday against Golden State as well. So, look, maybe that's water under the bridge. I'm not entirely sold that.
Water under
I'm
the
not sure
bridges.
that I did not actually mean to do a pun there. But yeah, that's we'll see. I don't fully buy that. But what I am curious about is, if let's say that situation isn't something that they're totally kind of like moving on from, or they don't, they don't think it's a big deal. I don't know. I kind of wonder, like, what would it take for them to consider moving Mikal Bridges this summer? Because also worth remembering, Mikal only has 1 year left on his contract after the season. The idea was they would obviously extend him for sure. Now I wonder, obviously, what's his happiness level here? What's their happiness with him? What does the contract extension look like? Is it just, give him the max and he'll take the max? Do the Knicks feel comfortable doing that with kind of what they've seen from him this year? Also, do they even have an option? Like, do they really have an option when you've given up, the control of your future draft capital? Do you even really have an option to not extend him? But I do. My main thinking though is, like, if they did choose to move on from Mikal Bridges, I would be very curious to know what level of player they would need back, or what they would need back, or what they would be looking for them to even entertain that as a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, when things really looked difficult for Bridges early in the year, I was thinking that at some point, you don't want to be in the position where he's a free agent and he's underachieved and you've lost those picks. I think there are people who rightfully would say you can't just punt. You've invested 5 picks. If you were to take a loss of 2 or 3 of those on net by moving him, that's a huge loss. But I'd also would, and I think that's a fair point. This isn't straight up sunk cost fallacy, but you have to kind of incorporate sunk cost fallacy a little bit by understanding that, yeah, like if they get to the end of the season and he's not a needle mover, I don't think it'll be because of this Tibbs thing. I think there's been weird stuff with players before. This isn't anything like that Evan Fournier situation. Like, Bridges was just saying, mix up the lineups a little bit, right? And he said it in a diplomatic way, right? Like, get the young guys some more minutes, right? I think it's harder to believe when the guys who are like, really, besides the dudes, there isn't a guy on the bench who you're like clamoring for more minutes for, right? Ideally, you'd want Mitch, but
Tommy Beer really wants us to play Tyler Kolek. It's like a disservice to it. I will say, I do think Kolek. I think this would be a time to give him a chance, but I also understand, like, I think that's more of like a negligible difference versus a can't believe Tyler Kolek's not playing right now.
Yeah, I mean, with Kolek, it's a few things. One, he was, I don't want to say a polarizing prospect, but people who liked Tyler Kolek's game really liked it. And it's tough. It's easy to see, right? Very creative passer in college, kind of a gritty, tough guy. He's completely different from TJ McConnell, beyond the fact that they're both white and kind of hustle, but that's the comp he got. So I think that whereas people who just weren't in love with him as a prospect, which I include myself, I liked his game, but I didn't think it would translate well. And I'm happy to be proven wrong on that. Certainly in his G League and Summer League reps, I was starting to really reconsider that view. I think the second thing is we have seen so many rookies come in and have success, right? In that lost season, we saw Grimes come in and really have a lot of success. When they finally benched Randall, Obi had like a 42-point game. IQ had a triple-double when he got to start. IQ in general, since his rookie year, has been, and even Obi as a rookie, like particularly that second half of the season, he had some really great moments. So we're used to rookies coming in and being able to help. Deuce as a rookie didn't get to play much because of Quickly and Brunson being ahead of him. But no. Deuce as a rookie did get to play more because they didn't have Brunson yet. But he had, there was that memorable comeback against Miami where it was really Quickly who scored a lot, but Deuce got a couple of huge rebounds. And really his defense helped bring that back. So we're used to seeing, especially when the Knicks draft guards, them come in and have success. So it's weird where it's like, okay, why am I watching Campaign right now? For what it's worth, like I saw a Campaign get a lot of heat yesterday. I think people are frustrated. He is kind of a high variance play. It's weird
He's
because
very streaky, very, very streaky.
yeah, he does the same thing every game, but the results are very like there's not much variance in his game. He's going to do the same thing. He's going to push the ball. He's going to move it and cut. Maybe he gets to the paint and takes that floater, or he's going to jack up a three. And they've simplified his role, and I think for what it's worth, he's been fine in that. I'm not sure getting a guy with like Kolek to move Kolek's strengths, I think would help, right? You get more ball movement. He's probably not as good a defender as Campaign, but we're talking about Campaign. We're not talking about Drew Holiday here. So, if you believe that they had this kind of lineup where you have all these shooters and a guy like Kolek gets them involved, I could get behind that. But if you're playing Precious and Mitch together, I'm not sure. Maybe it helps though, right? Because Deuce and Shamit are good off-ball movers. A guy like Kolek who could get them the ball, who could run pick and roll as an actual playmaker more than Payne, who's really more of a scorer. And I'm not saying Payne is some kind of a selfish player. He doesn't have that gravity. He's not that kind of a player. I get that, but I think we have to also reset our expectations that it's an exception that the Knicks have gotten so many early contributors more than the norm. And the front office is not going to fight Tibbs on Tyler Kolek this year. When they're 42 and 24. To answer, but I kind of disagree with you on just how big the Bridges quote was, and like how much it's a criticism people have made of Tibbs. It's weird that Tibbs lied about it.
No, I don't.
Not lied about it. Tibbs said that he lied, but yeah.
I didn't personally think the quote itself. I didn't think that part of the quote was that big of a deal. I thought the part of it that was a big deal was when he was like, talking about how he needs to figure out a way to show more of his game and be more productive within the offensive scheme and stuff like that. I thought that was a lot more hot maybe than the minutes thing, which I didn't particularly care about. But I thought it was more interesting that Tibbs chose to like not minimize or diffuse the situation. He kind of escalated it.
Yeah. I think Tibbs wants to win, right? Like we can argue that he hasn't been doing enough. There's no question that he's probably not satisfied with where they are, right? He said, I'm never happy, right? That was tongue in cheek. But, so I think that he probably, you've talked about this, right? A little bit of tension is probably healthy. And he hasn't run stuff for Bridges. I'm sure he's not blind to the fact that they gave up a lot, that you do want to be more dangerous. But even yesterday, there were so many times, I prefer the ball in Bridges' hands more than OG's. And there are times you'd get the ball on the perimeter and he has the option to kind of call his own number or run a set. And he just runs and hands it off to OG. And OG is more aggressive and had a good game. But you want him to, I think it's fair for Tibbs to, and I don't think that's a knock on the player, but I think it is fair for Tibbs to say that, look, I can get you more involved, but you got to show me that you're going to take that on. And, because you have these you're reasonably efficient player. Your field goal percentage always looks good. Are you going to get to the rim? Are you going to create contact? If the set doesn't immediately, if the right, quote unquote, right play that isn't going to force you to maybe have to take a bad shot is to kick it to another player, are you going to keep doing that? Because that takes precious seconds off the shot clock. That actually is a pun because sometimes that's where the ball ends up with Precious, which is a disaster, right? Now, it might be the quote unquote the right player. It's going to save Bridges from maybe having to take a shot that hurts his field goal percentage. But then you have to figure that out. And the only way to do that is to get reps. So I don't think this is some indication that Tibbs is unhappy with Bridges as a player. But I think that he's like, yeah, when that's brought up, and maybe he hasn't, maybe because of the Nova thing or whatever, maybe he hasn't felt like he's been able to deliver that message to Bridges. And I think they're both right. I think it is on Tibbs, I think, a little bit to diversify. And we've talked about that. But I've also said before that when Bridges gets the ball, when OG gets the ball to a fault, I think at times, he will call his own number, force it in there and try to make something happen, whether it's get to the line or it's take that mid-range. Bridges has all those capabilities. It's very fair for Tibbs to want to say that now that we're talking about this, let's talk about it. Which I don't necessarily think is indicative of some like big rift. I do think stylistically, if you look at the wings that like Bridges is not the platonic opposite of Jimmy Butler, but if that's the ideal Tibbs wing, it's pretty fair to say that Bridges is very different. Not super physical, isn't seeking contact at all. Butler, that's basically all he does. And isn't a rim. He's more of a finesse, movement shooter, which hasn't necessarily been the kind of player Tibbs has preferred. So there could be tension there, but I didn't read. I read it more as like, this is probably a message Tibbs is fairly delivering to Bridges, and Bridges needs to do that too. It goes both ways, and I think they both kind of sum that up. And to your point, the point you've made, a little healthy tension is not bad, as long as you're both committed and moving towards the same goal. Having said all that, I think the playoffs is going to dictate a lot of this. I think you're slowly starting to see Bridges be a little bit more aggressive. He's getting to the foul line every game, which is low bar, but hey, that is legitimate progress from where he was. I think like after 30 games, he had like 11 free throws or something. So you're starting to see that a little bit. And I think the playoffs are going to dictate it. If this is a guy who wins your playoff game, we've seen he can take over a game. We saw against San Antonio, Brunson didn't really have it. Cat was in foul trouble. I thought Cat played really well against Wemby, but foul trouble. They needed Bridges to go off, and he got 42. Against Portland, they needed him to take the big shot, and he took it. So he has that, and I think Tibbs has never gone the Phil Jackson route of like passive. Like this, we've noticed it most on the Knicks. Phil was never averse to like using unconventional ways to manage guys, right? And sometimes that meant airing out grievances in public or trying to use that as a motivating factor, right? There was that whole Sean Bradley thing with Porzingis. That's not Tibbs' style, but I do think he's probably like, we can get you more involved. You got to show me that you're going to take advantage of it. You're going to play. You don't have to change your game, but be more physical, get to the line, be more aggressive. And if you make a turnover, you make a turnover. Or if you have to take a tough shot, you take a tough shot, but that's the only way to get better. And that's the only way to start to earn these opportunities. Other guys, to be fair, like other guys have shown that they're willing to do that. You look at a guy like Deuce, we don't love it when he dribbles, but he knows that I need to be aggressive and I can't just only play to, I need to be able to do more somehow. And he will drive, he will force the issue. Cat will force the issue. Brunson is the whole team. So that's a different thing. OG will force the issue. I think that Bridges is starting to take those steps. I think Tibbs probably wants more from him there. And we talked about this with Hartenstein. When a player buys into what Tibbs is giving them, that's when he tends to, maybe it's a stupid power dynamic or whatever, but, power games or whatever, or maybe it's just, that's his philosophy. But when they start to give him what he wants, he loosens up, right? With Hartenstein, he had him basically be Mitchell Robinson, and Hartenstein struggled. When he started to really thrive in that role, then Tibbs was like, all right, now you can do stuff out of the high post. Now you can dribble, you can, post up a little bit. And so I think if Bridges shows that he's going to meet him halfway, and I think that'll really only be decided in the playoffs, they're not going to move on. But if you see that Bridges is still playing not with a lot of force in the playoffs, they're still super Brunson heavy throughout the game, not just late. And, the defense is nice, but not game changing to the point where like it actually saves Cat and drop. And you continue to see improvement from McBride. Maybe there's other guys out there. Maybe you at least sense the market. On the other hand, if Bridges is playing without force, maybe you get him on a discount then next year anyway. But I mean, you'd have to think that like they'll make a decision, extension or trade this offseason, right? Like if they're going to keep him, they'll extend him this offseason.
Of course. Yeah. They're not going to let it play out. I mean, that's been their MO.
So I think directionally it's getting better. It has to show up in the playoffs in terms of more aggression. I think the defense maybe is as good as you can expect it. But if he buys into what Tibbs is saying, not even just from maybe Tibbs will get the axe too, or you should have done, or maybe Tibbs will get fired for that too. Not fired, but more get pressure for like, you should have done more to facilitate for this guy. But they won't ignore that like Tibbs isn't completely wrong. Bridges does have the ability to do more than he's doing, and I think that, again, I think he's taking the right steps, especially with Brunson out. But that'll need to show up in the playoffs, and if it doesn't, I think, to your point, but I don't think it'll be because Tibbs is pissed or anything. I think Tibbs is saying something that everyone can see, that yeah, you're not doing enough to facilitate for him, but he can do more to help himself too.
Yeah, I agree. There needs to be more from both in that regard, for sure. All right, I think that's a good place to end it. Stacy, let the winner know they can find you and plug anything that you'd like to plug.
You can find me at StacyPatton89. Plug all the great work at the Strickland. There's been a couple of nice long form pieces, even beyond like recaps. So definitely check those out.
Awesome. Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. Hope everybody is enjoying March Madness. The Knicks have a game tomorrow night against the Heat. We have Emoji Madness dropping this week, so be on the lookout for that if you're in the Discord. And then we also have Prez has his first draft piece coming out on Monday as well, so be on the lookout for all those. All right. Thank you to our sponsor, BetOnline. That is our show for today. Hope everybody has a great week, and I'll see you on Friday. Peace.